Hello everyone, welcome to this first video. This is a short concept video where I just want to explain what you should be able to master. I'm not going to go into the detail which you need to work through your workbook and to get an understanding, but I want to make sure you understand what is expected of the specific study unit of you. And I will do this for every single study unit so that you just get a brief idea what needs to be done. Then you need to work through the information in your workbook and go to your specific activity book, work through the specific questions that we give you. And then when we have those specific classes that we've already mentioned, when we talked about the layout and the working program, we will get into discussing some of these things more in detail. So make sure you need to work through it, but this should give you a bit of guidance as where to focus your time on. So I'm just going to stop my video again, making sure you understand where we need to go and share my screen with you. So if we, at the end of the day, look at this, you will see we have a home activity, which we ask you to do. So you will see we tell you to read through the following. So you need to go to your workbook and work things. Make sure you work through your workbook chapter 2, get an understanding of the chapter summary, work through the knowledge, the diagnostics afterwards, making sure you understand it. And then we give you questions in your practice bank or in that work activity book, which you need to work through to master these specific concepts you need to learn. So when we look at fundamental ethical and professional principles, you need to see that it's asked normally within this question 2 with 20 marks within the question in the examination. So it is in section 4A, question 2 normally asked. So you need to see it's built into 3 parts, these items. It's the professional and ethical issues, number 1. So there's certain things you need to understand under the professional and ethical issues. Then we have also related parties. So sometimes they ask us related parties information. Why is it relevant? Why do we need to look at it? And then lastly, they also ask us some accounting policies, changes in estimates, and errors that we need to account for. So you need to make sure you understand all 3 of those different aspects. Okay. So when we look at professional and ethical issues, you will need to see that there are certain principles, ethical principles, that we need to make sure we understand according to ACCA's Code of Ethics and Conduct. So you need to understand what is meant with each one of these items that is mentioned within this part. So you need to understand what's professional behavior, what is confidentiality, what is professional competence and due care, what is objectivity, what is integrity. You need to make sure that you read through it and understand what is meant by it. Then you need to see for those fundamental principles, there's certain threats. So we need to be able to ask you, what is the ethical issues? Then we tell you, please mention which one of these threats is there. What's the principle that we have? And then what is the threat for that specific principle? And then you need to see for each one of these threats, there's an explanation what it is, but when there's a threat like this, we need to have appropriate safeguards built into place. So we either need to have something created by our profession, according to what we've discussed on the first page, or by the client specifically himself, or when there's specific requirements that we need to make sure that we cover through professional development, getting CPD hours where there's education and training that someone needs to go through. We need to make sure that it fits all in there. So you can work through the ethical considerations, making sure you understand these works, and then go and have a look at IS1, the fair presentation that is asked within the accounting framework. So they give you a framework about how to go about these decisions when we ask them. So you need to see what's the relevant fact, what's the ethical issue that's involved. Is there any fundamental principles that is threatened that we need to see? And then, do the internal processes exist that mitigate the threat? Are there any alternative courses of action that I can take? And then finally, I need to see, how does this affect me? And do I need to apply something for the necessary safeguard? So you can see we will work through certain questions, but you need to understand the following 3 things. You need to understand what's the ethical principles, what is the threats to those ethical principles, and then how do I answer a question when they ask me something about that. Then when we get to related parties, you need to understand what related parties are. So you need to understand that you need to go back to IAS 24 and work through the definition of a related party and understand what is expected from a related party disclosure. So make sure you understand the disclosure from related parties specifically, because that is something that we will normally ask. That is also normally a fundamental ethical issue, which we pick up in questions, which they normally do not mention. So again, we will give you some homework activities and some questions that we work through so that you can go and make sure you are correct for that part specifically. And then accounting policies, estimates, and errors. You need to understand that this covers it as follows. So accounting policies tell me how to create the accounting policy. What's the accounting policy that should be in place? And then also, what happens if accounting policy changes? How do I need to account for it? So you need to make sure that I understand if I need to account accounting policy. Is it retrospectively or is it prospectively that I need to account for these changes in accounting policies? When do it apply? When is it a change in estimate? And I need to understand that a change in estimate is not an error. It's not something that has changed. It's a new information that became aware to us. And that meant that my estimation changed. And we need to see that it's applied prospectively. And we need to see how we need to account for that according to IAS 8. And then prior period errors, you will need to see for those prior period errors, there are certain things that we need to account for, and also see that the accounting treatment tells me that I need to retrospectively account for it if there's prior period errors, because I need to compare apples with apples. And you need to make sure that you understand what is expected from you to do when you have to account for those prior period errors. And what I then want you to see from what I wanted to discuss in this section, you specifically needed to see that this section is built up out of 3 parts. And I'm just going to go back to that part on my screen again so that you follow. So you need to make sure that you know what is the professional and ethical issues, what is related parties, transactions, what is meant by it, and see that it's also linked with professional and ethical issues. And the same with accounting policies. Why? Because sometimes if there's changes in accounting policies, errors on estimates, people don't always account for it correctly, and then it becomes an ethical issue. So make sure that you see the link between these 3 chapters specifically. I really hope this helps you to just wrap your mind around it and see what you need to be able to do. And then once we meet for this specific chapter, we will get into detail. I hope you have an awesome day. Keep well and cheers.